All right, hello again. So in order to continue our Anne Frank unit, we are going to be doing a 3D tour of the Annex. The easiest way to get there is to go to annefrank.org. Now this is a website for the museum. They turned the Annex, where she and her family hid for 2 years, into a museum. And so you can go here, you can check stuff out, but what your job is actually going to be is doing the secret Annex online. So I'm going to click on that, and that takes me here. It says Discover Anne Frank's hiding place. So what we get to do is we can go inside and look at the Annex. I can't fly you all to Amsterdam. I wish I could. I wish I could fly myself there and we can go and view it, but we can't. So this is the next best thing. So what you do is you have your paper, and if you look, I wrote a lot of directions on top, but there are bolded parts above the question. So it says Room Frank family. So that means we need to go to the Room Frank family. So our first step is to go straight inside. Now there are two ways that we can do this. First off, they were in this annex, which was behind the office building that her dad worked. And what they would do is they came up and they put a bookcase in front. Now, there are two ways to navigate. One, if you click on these yellow parts, you will go through. So we're going to go in through the bookcase, going through the door. And so a lot of people, thought that was a really good idea. Put a bookcase in front of the door. No one would know. And that actually worked very, very well for a long time. Now, there are two other things you can do. So you can continue doing that, and you can kind of go around and explore, but there's also this handy map. So if you open the 3D floor plan, this is her father's business area, but this is where they were hiding. So you know that you need to go to the Room Frank family, which if I scroll around long enough, I can find the Room Frank family. So that's where we are going to start. I'll click on that. It'll take us right there. Hopefully, it'll load. There we go. All right, so this is what they imagine it would have looked like. Well, they know it kind of looked like this when the Franks were there. So if we move around, we can see here's a bed. They had some books. The door. There's some other things going on. The other bed. It ends up that Mr. and Mrs. Frank slept in here, and then Margot eventually moves in. So you need to watch the video Studious Margot, which is right here. So I'll click on it and we can listen.
Margot is as quiet and serious as Anne is lively and cheerful. She spends most of her time with her nose in a book. She's following a Latin correspondence course, but is also immersing herself in many other languages and subjects, such as mechanics and medicine. Margot is really studious, and always has been. After just 2 years in the Netherlands, she was already top of her class. Apart from being clever, industrious, kind, and helpful, she's also very beautiful. Margot has gorgeous brown, dreamy eyes. Even wearing her large glasses, Miep still considers her a real beauty. Margot hopes to become a maternity nurse in Israel after the war is over. She sets such a good example that Anne sometimes gets tired of it. Anne can see a less appealing side to her sister too. Margot isn't exactly what you'd call young, she writes in her diary. It saddens Margot a little to watch Peter and Anne becoming such good friends. It's hard for her to talk about it, so she writes Anne a note. In writing, it's easier for her to explain that she isn't jealous, but that she regrets not having someone she can share her own feelings with.
So if you would like to, you can click around the room more if you do this on your own. I'm not really going to play anymore, but this was their room. This is what they look like, and now we need to go and find Anne Frank's room. Now, because I've done this before, I know that if I go through this door, I'm going to go find Anne Frank's room. So she was right next to her parents, and if you notice, these rooms are not very big, because obviously they were in hiding. They weren't even supposed to be there. But this is Anne Frank's room. So let's listen to this video first.
Anne brightens up her room by sticking up pictures of anything that takes her interest, from movie stars to dancers, royalty and works of art. At first, she doesn't mind sharing her room with Fritz Pfeffer, but she grows to find him increasingly irritating. He makes little noises at night, like a fish gasping for air.
So first, Anne shared her room with Margot, but then she switches and she has to share with Fritz Pfeffer, which we're going to learn more about in the play. But this was their room. This was one bed. And this was where Anne would write. This is her diary. And then this was the other bed. I believe Anne slept on the smaller one. This larger one was for Fritz, and they decorated here with a teddy bear. But there are the pictures they talked about, so we need to watch a big argument about a small table.
Anne's favourite spot for writing and working is the little table in her room. It's a nice quiet spot where she can concentrate much better than in the busy living room. But the arrangement is far from perfect. Anne's roommate, Fritz Pfeffer, has decided that Anne can only use the little table while he's taking his afternoon nap. Anne has a tremendous thirst for knowledge, and such limited access to the table just isn't enough. She also finds it terribly unfair that Pfeffer considers the room and the little table to be his alone. When she proposes to him that maybe she can have the table to herself twice a week, from 4 to 5:30 in the afternoon, he immediately refuses. It's not like she's working on anything important, he says. All that mythology? What kind of work is that? Anne is outraged at Pfeffer's insensitive remarks. That night she confronts him about it again. She reminds him that they had agreed the room would be for both of them. Pfeffer reacts furiously, telling Anne how shockingly selfish she is and that he has never known any child like her. Anne writes in her diary that she struggled to stop herself smacking him in the face. When she tells her father about the argument, Otto Frank goes and talks to Pfeffer the same evening. That does the trick. Anne gets her 2 afternoons at the table. Pfeffer is so angry about it that he refuses to speak to Anne for some time. Anne writes perceptively,
"Anyone who's so petty and pedantic at the age of 54 was born that way and is never going to change."
So this is where she would write, this is where she would sit, and then you have to watch Anne's most treasured possession, which was, unsurprisingly, her diary.
On June the 12th, 1942, her 13th birthday, Anne's parents give her a diary as a gift. At first, she finds it a little odd to be writing in a diary. She can't imagine that she, or anyone else, would ever be interested in the outpourings of a 13-year-old girl. But actually, that's beside the point. She wants to write and get things off her chest. After a few months, Anne names her diary Kitty and explains why. She feels that she lacks a real friend.
"All I think about when I'm with friends is having a good time. I can't bring myself to talk about anything but ordinary everyday things. We don't seem to be able to get any closer, and that's the problem. Maybe it's my fault that we don't confide in each other. In any case, that's just how things are, and unfortunately, they're not liable to change."
When the Frank family goes into hiding 3.5 weeks later, the first thing Anne packs is her diary. It turns out to be extremely useful. At first, she's relieved that they can hide safely, but eventually their new life in the secret annex starts to weigh heavily on her. She can never go outside, the windows have to be closed, the curtains drawn, and worst of all, she has to be silent all day. She's very relieved to at least have her diary.
"The nicest part is being able to write down all my thoughts and feelings. Otherwise, I'd absolutely suffocate."
Anne writes sharply and wittily about everything that takes place in the secret annex. She describes all the funny and uplifting things that happen, but also the arguments and conflicts. No one is spared. not even herself. When she looks back at 18 months' worth of diary entries in the secret annex, Anne notices how much she has changed. Many of her observations strike her as less important now than they were at the time. For instance, she regrets many of the furious passages she wrote about her mother. She blames the unusual circumstances. If they hadn't been in hiding, she might have been able to stamp her feet a few times or complain about her mother behind her back. Anne's diary is her most treasured possession. On April the 11th, 1944, everyone in the secret annex has come together in a panic. Someone has broken in, and they can hear the bookcase being shaken. Everyone is scared, thinking they're really about to be discovered now. Anne's diary is mentioned.
So that is our first part. I'm going to pause now and do another video just because so this one doesn't get too long. If you want to go on the site and explore yourself and watch more videos, you are more than welcome to do so.